What's up? My name is Mel, and today we're going to be talking about some weird, wacky, and wild reads. So I feel like the month of October is when people start to look for that just really strange book, something that's going to make you go, huh? For most of the story, or really like stretch you out of your comfort zone, things that are just a little out there, a little weird, super wacky. And I have 10 recommendations and one honorable mention for you guys that definitely falls in that category. We have got a range from thriller to horror to one dark romance, so hopefully there's something in here for everybody. And in no particular order, I'm just going to start pulling off books. I personally did not love all of these, but I do see how each and every one of them could work for someone else. So I'll try to give you my thoughts, but also let you know why you might like the book so that hopefully you can find something that works really well for you. I have dual recommendations from one author on this list, and that is T. Kingfisher. The first one that I want to recommend is The Hollow Places, and my personal favorite from this author. I absolutely adored this book. It takes place in a taxidermy store with a woman that is trying to help out her uncle and get away from kind of an ugly divorce. When she finds a hole, I think behind a painting or something, and realizes that it is to another world and there are some things in there that would like to kill us. There is a weird otter, there is a gay best friend. I adored this book and would highly, highly recommend it. And this one is a horror, so it is on the more spooky, scary side. Then we have What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, and this one is a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher. Very, very close retelling in my opinion. It follows a young woman who is going back to a friend's home when the friend calls and states that she may be dying. There are weird hares. The rabbits are doing some very odd things. There are some odd like mushrooms that are trying to take over, and they've got to figure out what's going on. This one is horror, but I wouldn't say that it is graphic horror. It just is weird and wacky. So if you like Edgar Allan Poe and you want something with similar vibes and you loved The Fall of the House of Usher, this is definitely going to be for you. Then we have one that I did not personally enjoy, but I've seen very many people enjoy it, and it is absolutely weird and wacky, so we can definitely put it in this category, and that is The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. Recently read this one thinking it was kind of a horror fantasy, and it is and it's not. It's horror, it's fantasy, it's sci-fi, it's a little bit of humor. It's just an odd book overall. Most of this book makes no sense, and the ending is very weird and out there. It didn't work for me, but if you are looking for something that is super, super strange and kind of has like a literary undertone, then I think this one will work well for you. It's about Carolyn, whose father has recently died. When she was a kid, she and other children were adopted by this man to become librarians at the Library of Mount Char, and they were each given their own catalog, I think is what they call it, to study like different languages, talking to the dead, talking to animals, and they could not share their catalog with any of the others or something bad would happen. Dad ruled with an iron fist and now he's missing. Super weird. Just kind of be aware of that going in. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it's not supposed to. Then speaking of doesn't make a whole lot of sense and not supposed to, we have Bunny by Mona Awad. This one is it's an everywhere recommendation. If I didn't mention it, somebody would be like, why didn't you mention Bunny? Everybody's heard of this book, I feel like, at this point. It is a dark academia about Samantha, who couldn't be more of an outsider in her MFA program at New England, but she gets kind of roped into this group of girls that call each other Bunny, and they kind of appear like a cult, and she gets roped into that and pulled into that society. It's weird. It's really weird. And when I finished it, I didn't know whether it was a 1-star or a 4-star, and honestly, 2 or 3 years later, even based off of what I remember, still couldn't tell ya. I know a ton of people that absolutely love this one, so if you're looking for dark academia with super weird, wacky horror vibes, this one's gonna work for you. Then we have probably the only Stephen King I'm gonna mention, and that's actually The Gunslinger by Stephen King. This is the first book in the Dark Tower series. No, I have not read further than The Gunslinger, so this is purely based on this book, but it is pretty weird. It is a little bit out there, and there's a lot of things that you just don't really understand in this book, which I feel like is intentional. It follows Roland, who is a haunting figure, a loner with a spellbinding journey of good and evil. He lives in a desolate world, and he befriends a young boy named Jake. From what I can tell, this may have a little bit of like a portal fantasy element. Again, I've not read later in the series, so I'm not trying to spoil anything because I truly don't know. But this one did have kind of a weird atmosphere to me, and so I thought it would work well on this list. Then we have Insomnia by Sarah Pinborough, and I actually lied, and this is a Jill author recommendation as well because I also want to recommend Behind Her Eyes. But first we will talk about Insomnia. This is about a woman whose mother went completely crazy and stopped sleeping when she was 40 years old, and now she's creeping up on her 40th birthday and realizing that she can no longer sleep either. It is a little paranormal, a little weird, and I loved this book up until the ending, and unfortunately the ending just did not work for me, which is a common theme in Sarah Pinborough. Either you love it or you hate it. This particular one didn't work for me, but if you like an ending that is kind of out there and doesn't really explain everything, then I think this one would work for you. I don't know, I loved the concept, but there were certain things about the execution that didn't work. I still would recommend it because if you've liked other works by Sarah Pinborough, I think there is a decent possibility that you could still enjoy this one. And then talking about Behind Her Eyes, this is probably her most popular read and one of the most polarizing reads. I read it a long time ago and loved it when I read it. I thought the ending was brilliant, but most people absolutely hate it and think it's dumb, so kind of depends on which camp you fall in. It's very twisty. I did not see the second twist coming at all. I saw the first one, but not the second one. If you've read this book, you know you know. And it is very strange because it is about a single mom who is embarrassed to discover that the man that she kissed in the bar was actually her new boss, and he is married. And then when Adele, a new to town woman, invites her over for coffee, she realizes that Adele is actually David's wife. From the outside, they look like the perfect couple, but the only thing that's crystal clear is something in the marriage is wrong, and Louise can't guess how wrong or how far a person might go to protect the marriage's secrets. That doesn't sound weird and wacky, but I can assure you, it is. Then we have Middle Game by Shauna McGuire. This is actually a fantasy sci-fi kind of read. Everyone loves Middle Game and heard of Middle Game, I feel like, but definitely felt like the weird category applied here. It is about Roger and Dodger, one who is really good at the written word, one who is really good at the mathematical world, and they have been created by a mad scientist to follow some kind of road. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but I do like that it says they aren't exactly gods either. Not entirely, not yet. This one doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you get closer to the end, and then things really start to rev up. The wax melting hand does play a part in the story, if that kind of gives you an idea of how weird this book is. I enjoyed it a lot, and I do want to read Seasonal Fears, but I've heard that the companion's not quite as good, so I'm a little bit hesitant. Let me know down in the comments if you think you would recommend me read it or just stick to Middle Game, because this one definitely is a close-ended story on its own. You don't have to continue. It's not really a series. It's more companion novels, but definitely would recommend this one for the weird and slightly wacky. Not like bunny weird, but little weird. And then we have two more recommendations. You didn't think I could go the whole video without mentioning Grady Hendrix, did you? I feel like Horror Store is probably the most weird and wacky of the ones that I have read from Grady Hendrix. This one is set up in an IKEA store, and things start to happen within the IKEA store that seems very, very strange, and our main character has been offered a lot of money to work the overnight shift and try to catch these hooligans that are vandalizing the store. Turns out, not hooligans. This one is set up like an IKEA shop. The beginning does have like little illustrations. It's not IKEA, but it is. It's IKEA. Never really thought that a horror in an IKEA store would work, but here we are. One that did not work for me, but again, I think would work for other people, is Little Heaven by Nick Cutter. This one definitely leans into the weird and wacky side of things. There are creatures in here that I don't really know how to explain, but they are very grotesque and very odd, and the entire book kind of just has an odd, slightly comical overtone to it. It didn't work for me because it was a little too long for the grotesque imagery. I felt like that was all we were really getting in the story, and for me that's going to work in something that's more like 150 to 200 pages. But if the horror that is more, not exactly body horror, I wouldn't say that this is body horror, but if more imagery horror, like grotesque horror, is something that you enjoy quite a lot, then I think this one would work for you. Definitely on the weird and wacky side, but in a different way, again, than Bunny would be, and would highly recommend this one. And then I also wanted to mention The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I don't own this one, even though I gave it 5 stars, and I'm not really sure why. This one has the perspective of a cat, so that's definitely a little weird and wacky. It's following a guy, and he has come under fire for the murder of a young girl at a pond lake thing close to him when she goes missing and turns up dead. And we're kind of flipping back and forth between many different perspectives. It is a little confusing, it is a little bit disorienting, but I thought the ending was extremely well done and I absolutely adored it. And then last but not least, an honorable mention that I wanted to give is Satan's Affair by H.D. Carlton. This is the prequel to Haunting Adeline. I can't really find online if people recommend reading one before the other, but I did read Satan's Affair first, and this book is really strange. It follows a woman who works at a carnival, and she has a bunch of men that are surrounding her that do to her every whim, but they also kill people that they think are not good people and deserve it. So she is kind of following God's plan for her by getting rid of all of these satanic people. I thought that this novella was going to be a 1-star read for most of it. And then I got to the end and everything wrapped up in a way that made it a 4-star read. It was so odd for most of it and just seemed entirely unnecessary, but at the same time, when we got to the end and really understood why everything was the way that it was, it seemed brilliant. So I definitely do recommend that for my, I guess, dark romance fans. That one wasn't really a romance in my opinion, but it was kind of a horror romance, I guess. I found it more of a thriller. I guess it just depends on who you are, how you're going to interpret the genre of that one. It is short, it is on Kindle Unlimited, but definitely enjoyed it. Okay, everybody, so I think that that is all 10 recommendations that I have for you of weird and wacky books. Hopefully you found something on here that struck your fancy. Let me know down in the comments if you have any others that you would recommend to people that are looking for the odd, the strange, and the little bit crazy. If you just want to let me know that you're here, leave me a clown emoji. I feel like clowns are weird and wacky. If you guys want to spend a little bit more time with me, links to my Patreon as well as Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads are in the description box below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, subscribe if you wanna, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!